Hey internets, time for a quick rant on how the Democrats screwed themselves this election quite hard. For those of you who do not know, democracy is not exactly a perfect system. In fact, it has quite a lot of flaws that children growing up in the West are not really taught. People are just kind of indoctrinated to assume that there's no flaws in it whatsoever and that the democracy system works perfectly. But the reality, of course, if you think about it just a little bit, you find out that's not the case. And one of those flaws I would like to specifically talk about in this video, because it shows how the Democrats have screwed up, is the fact that democracy effectively isn't a real choice in the instance where voters are intentionally given false information. For example, say that there's two vials. One that would grant everyone immunity to cancer, and another that would cause everyone to go permanently blind. Now, the obvious choice here, if there was some kind of election that would require everyone in a democratic society to drink one of these vials, then the one granting immunity to cancer would be the obvious choice to go with, right? Well, yes, of course. Of course you'd rather be immune to cancer than go blind. But of course the thing is, what if all of the media involved in this election and everyone in the party and the government that were involved in the selection process deliberately gave the voters misinformation and propaganda that confused the two vials for each other to the point where the populace was effectively bamboozled into choosing the wrong vial? Everyone would be then forced into permanent blindness, including those who did their homework and knew that the party was lying. Now, this at first may sound like an absurdist and unrealistic hypothetical about democracy, and admittedly, in some ways it is. But it exists to demonstrate the point that democracy is at the mercy of information. If voters do not actually know what it is that they are voting for, then it is not really much different from just throwing darts at a board. So how this pertains to Democrats in this current election is simple. We now know that those working with Biden in the White House, along with numerous members of the DNC, hid the fact of Biden's obvious cognitive decline from voters in the primary. And this reality is one of those things where the more you think about it, the worse you realize the situation is and just what it implies. First off, now that the evidence is overwhelming, many of the Democratic leaders are acting like they are just now noticing that something is wrong with Joe. Very big names in the DNC, including Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and etc., are of course now just reportedly pushing for him to step down because of his obvious signs of decline and inability to carry out his job. But of course, that's not how cognitive decline and dementia works. Biden did not just suddenly wake up on the day of debating Trump and was suddenly experiencing difficulty forming complete sentences and showing any level of serious engagement or thought process. People had been noticing this for a long time now, and of course, if you understand dementia, you know that this is obviously the case. Rather, dementia symptoms are a day-by-day thing, with more and more noticeable decline every few weeks or so. This means that the party knew full well, especially those working directly in the White House, or at least they had to have known, that Joe was just not up to the job anymore. And yet, they lied through the media to the voter base anyways, telling everyone that anyone implying Biden was in cognitive decline was in fact a conspiracy theorist, which of course everyone now knows was just a propaganda campaign. This shows the DNC's absolute contempt and total lack of respect for their own voter base. They led registered Democrats on to bamboozle them all into voting for a non-functioning president in the primary. No one would vote for a potato if they knew that they were voting for a potato. And yet, here we are. Secondly, it proves the conspiracy theory that Joe Biden is most likely not really in charge is in fact not really a conspiracy theory. If he's not capable of doing his job, obviously somebody else is handling it. Again, another thing that no one can really deny anymore. Joe Biden is more or less a brand right now. It is various bureaucrats and managerial class members who are calling the shots. Again, we don't exactly know who it is, we just know it's not Joe. And now all of this combines to the consequences that the DNC now has to choose between two bad options. They can either stick with Biden as their presidential candidate for the 2024 election, or they can try to replace him in the last minute, and both of these come with some pretty severe drawbacks. If they stick with Biden, then everyone who has been paying even the slightest amount of attention knows that this again just means that you aren't really voting for Joe Biden if you check his name at the ballot box, but rather you are voting for whatever or whoever is in charge of taking care of him and advising his moves. A vote for Joe is thus, in all likelihood, just a vote for the bureaucrats who will manage him again. It is a vote for an administration, a brand, not a real candidate that has any real agency or actual platform, beyond just being an establishment puppet. So the only real reason voters have to choose him right now is if their TDS is so bad that they're, well, perfectly willing to knowingly vote for the status quo, just to stop Trump. Or perhaps you're just voting for Kamala Harris, as he may just immediately step down after winning the election. Now, the problem the DNC has here is voters aren't actually that stupid. Voters tend to make less rational decisions in a democracy than they do with their own finances. But voters are also not complete potatoes. Everyone who has at least average intellect and possesses basic political literacy now knows that the Biden administration is extremely dishonest about their most basic functions. Anyone with sense now knows that a vote for Biden isn't really a vote for Biden. In other words, everyone knows he is a completely fake candidate. And honestly, the poll numbers show it. Biden is getting destroyed by Trump right now, and all but the most delusional analysts are admitting it. So sticking with Biden almost guarantees the DNC will face defeat very shortly. Now, of course, on the other hand, if they don't stick with Biden, then the DNC is effectively admitting just how little they really care about democracy. They first gaslit their voter base into voting for a candidate who cannot actually do his job, and so now they're trying to switch him to some other internally selected candidate whom they will just tell registered Democrats, "Okay, peasants, here's your new master," whether it be Newsom, Harris, or whoever, and then Democrat voters will be told that they just need to bend the knee and worship their new overlord, handpicked for them by the same corrupt bureaucrats who gaslit them in the first place. No matter who they choose to replace Biden with in this scenario, which talks are currently very much underway to the point where they might even conclude those talks by the time I release this video, it will come across to people as a bait and switch. Just more proof that the DNC's commitment to democracy is nothing more than empty words and is thus just completely unserious. So this option just makes it even more obvious to voters that Biden's administration doesn't really believe in democracy at all. So I would not be surprised if anyone who they pick to be his replacement ends up getting creamed anyways. And now, some people who watch me regularly may ask me, "Now, wait a minute there, Mentis Wave. Aren't you just a Hoppian libertarian anyways? Don't you not really believe in democracy either? What do you care about all this? Don't you just slightly prefer Trump to win anyways?" Well, yes, that's all true. I don't really believe liberal democracy is the best humanity can do. I just find it absolutely hilarious when corrupt politicians virtue signal about how much they love democracy, and then of course slip the mask, proving that when they say our democracy, they don't actually mean yours. It's funny as heck, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. But anyways, that's all I have to say. Just a quick rant. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe and whatnot, and if you really enjoyed it, you can support me on Ko-Fi or Subscribestar, or by buying some merch. Till next time.